This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
What's going on, everybody? Dan Graca pinch hitting today for Stephen A. Smith. We got you covered for the next 2 hours right here on ESPN Radio. You want to be part of the program, you know the drill. It's 866-SAY-ESPN. That's 866-729-3776. We'll be joined a little bit later on by ESPN NFL analyst, our pal Herm Edwards. But of course, we got to start with the baseball. And show of hands right now. All right, show of hands. Let me see them. I don't care where you are. I want to see the hands. How many of you, and I don't care if you're a Yankee fan or not, how many of you actually thought that this team, after Friday night, after the debacle, which was game number 2, with Girardi deciding not to go out there and challenge whether or not Lonnie Chisenhall got hit by the pitch or not, how many of you thought that this team would win 3 in a row against a team that won 22 straight games at one point during this baseball season and engineer an improbable comeback and be sitting here playing the Houston Astros 1 round away from the World Series? Let me see the hands. Let me see the hands. I know mine's not up. I thought they were done. I thought they were finished. And how could you not, right? How did you not think that this team would have any shot at all to knock off the juggernaut known as the Cleveland Indians? Look, at the beginning of the season, all right, when we're asked to make all our picks and predictions, I picked the Cleveland Indians to win the whole darn thing. Because we've seen this before, right? Just a couple of years ago, where the Kansas City Royals lost a Game 7 of the World Series, came back the following year, beat the Mets, won the title. All right? Cleveland came so close last year. So close, right? Lost a Game 7 in their ballpark to the Cubs. We know how the story went. And on paper, they were a better baseball team this year than they were a season ago. They actually entered the postseason with a healthy starting rotation as opposed to a year ago. There was no way that this team was ever not going to capitalize on the opportunity, or at the very least, not even have the chance to get past round 1, right? And they took a 2-0 lead. 2-0 lead. But that's why you got to play the games, right? That's why you have to lay it out on the line, and you have to play the games. And I've always said this. All right, and I truly believe this 100%, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, okay? The most rewarding, the most satisfying experiences that you are going to have as a fan, that we have as fans, is when your team takes you on a ride and takes you on a journey that you didn't see coming, even if they put it right in front of your face. It comes out of absolutely nowhere. All right, think back just a couple of years ago, when the Mets went all the way to the World Series. Yeah, they didn't win it, but how many people at the beginning of 2015, certainly at the midway point of 2015, and maybe even entering the postseason that year, thought the Mets were going to go all the way to the World Series, that Daniel Murphy was going to turn into Babe Ruth, that these pitchers were going to mature right before our eyes? Nobody thought that was going to happen, and that's why it was so satisfying if you're a Met fan. And there's countless other examples that I can give you. But let's just bring it back to this Yankee team. I think the same applies for what you're seeing out of these Bombers. All right, go back to spring training right now. And maybe if you're a Yankee fan, you were a little bit more optimistic than others. But I'm just telling you from one unbiased observer, and that's yours truly. All right, I thought when the season started, the Yankees were no better than the 4th best team on paper in the American League East. All right, they were still building something. They were integrating a lot of these young players, the baby Bombers. All right, I thought that clearly they were behind the Boston Red Sox. Even Baltimore and Toronto on paper looked like they were more ready to contend, at least for 2017, than the Yankees. But then the season started, and the Yanks got out of the gate quick. And Aaron Judge turned into Babe Ruth all of a sudden. And you're saying, wait, how is this happening? What's happening here? CeCe Sabathia turned back the clock and was pitching like a guy who was still wearing a Cleveland Indians uniform back in the day. How did this happen? Didi Gregorius, Starlin Castro, Brett Gardner. Where did this come from? This wasn't supposed to happen this year. Yankees were at least a year or 2 away. They can't be contending for first place. Oh, but they did. They did. Give kudos to the front office. Brian Cashman, Hal Steinbrenner, for going out there midway through the season and making the additions necessary that put them in a position to compete for a run here in 2017 when they thought, you know what, we got ourselves an opportunity. This could actually happen this year. And look at how it all played out here. Right? Yankees winning that game last night. Yankees winning this series if they didn't go out and get themselves a David Robertson and bring him back to the organization? I don't think so. No way. Brian Cashman doesn't make that trade a couple of years ago, which you thought was as nondescript as any from a guy like Didi Gregorius. Yankees winning this series? Don't think so. And let me start with Didi Gregorius for a second. All right, because I tweeted this out last night, and I've been really saying it all year on all my other shows. And you can follow me, as always, on Twitter, at Dan Graca, Graca. Aaron Judge is going to get a lot of votes for American League MVP, and rightfully so. Guy had a phenomenal season. Okay, he'll be one of the 3 finalists for AL MVP. No qualms there. Judge is one of the front runners for AL MVP, but Didi Gregorius is the Yankees' most valuable player. No other way around it. No other way around it. The Yankees are not sitting here today with a game tomorrow night in Houston for the ALCS without Didi Gregorius. The guy has been clutch with a capital C. And you've heard it all. Think about whose shoes he stepped in for, right? As iconic a player as this organization has ever seen, as this New York City has ever seen. When you're talking about sports legends. And if you want to just narrow it down to the Yankees, that's an organization that has had their fair share of iconic players. And you don't even hear a peep about Derek Jeter. Not that he's forgotten. Not that you're not going to appreciate all he did and his legacy isn't rock solid, but Didi has stepped in as if there was no transition whatsoever. And he's just one piece. How about the manager? How about this manager? And look, I'm as guilty as anybody. I was right there roasting him over hot coals just like everybody else on Friday night. All right? And you knew that the clock was ticking. And I think deep down he probably knew it too. Fireable offense. There's no way he survives this. Joe Girardi cost the Yankees. Their season is going to be over here in a matter of a couple of days because of the manager and his ineptitude on Friday night. Give Joe a lot of credit. Give the guys in that locker room a lot of credit. And you heard all the rhetoric last night. Joe Girardi saying, those guys picked me up. Picked me up. And now all of a sudden we're not having these silly conversations about, boy, you think Joe Girardi's going to maybe manage the Mets next year? Would the Mets make a run at Joe Girardi? Or where's Joe Girardi going to go? If the Yankees go get themselves another manager, okay, they'd be silly. They'd be silly. Because any other team out there will be lining up for Joe Girardi's services. He's that good. He's that good of a manager. Sometimes you don't press all the right buttons. You know, it was a week ago in the wild card game against Minnesota when Joe decided, you know what, Luis Severino, who's been my ace all year and who only was able to get one lousy stinking out, he went out there, got him out of the game, and rolled the dice perfectly, getting 26 outs with his bullpen. He looked like a genius. You know what? He had a bad night Friday. It happens. As he told you, and he said it many, many, many times. Worst night he's ever had in the dugout. As a player, as a manager, as a coach, whatever. And he bared the responsibility. But now that's all forgotten. It's all forgotten. Because the Yanks came back and did what many thought was impossible. Winning 3 straight against the Cleveland Indians. And some will say that's the great thing about playoff baseball. And I think if you're on the other side of the fence right now, you probably say that that's the unfortunate thing. Because there is no greater disparity in any sport, team sport, than baseball when you're talking about the regular season versus the playoff sample size. I know in the National Football League, playoffs are one game, right? You don't have to be the better team. You just got to be the better team that day. It's one game versus 16 you play during the regular season, right? But in baseball, you play 162 games. Think about that for a second. Everybody tells you the baseball season's too long. 162 games. Cleveland was awesome during the baseball season. For my money, the best team in the sport during the regular season. They were scary good. And it was just a month ago, right? They set a record by winning 22 consecutive games. 22 in a row. Fast forward a month later, they lose 3 in a row. And their season's over. Like that. Like that. You're a Yankee fan, you got to enjoy this. This is special. And there were so many twists and turns, not just with this game last night, but with the entire series. But we'll get into what happened last night. A lot of people deserve credit on this one. Not just the manager, not just Didi, not just CC Sabathia, who gave you everything he had and then some. I know he didn't pitch deep into the game last night, but that's not what CC Sabathia is anymore. He went out there, he took you into the fifth inning, he battled, he gutted it out, and if you looked around the rest of Major League Baseball, and if you looked at some of these other starting pitchers who make a lot of money, i.e. Zach Greinke out in Arizona, who don't have the guts, who don't have the heart to go out there and pitch a big game, even if you don't have your best stuff. That's what CC gave you. And you have to admire that. You're a Yankee fan, you have to be thrilled. Because as I started off the show by saying, you couldn't see this coming in a million years. And you know what? I was under the assumption that, all right, whatever happens against the Indians, because you were such decided underdogs, guess what? It's gravy. Right? After they won that wild card game, whatever happens against the Indians, it's gravy. You win, super. If you lose, get them next year, and you're going to be one of the favorites probably to win a pennant in 2018. But expectations change, don't they? Sometimes you have to shuffle things around when you're writing the story. You beat the Indians. Why stop now? Why stop now? After tonight, there's only going to be 4 teams left. 4 teams in baseball that have a shot to win the top prize. You're one of the 4. You win 4 more against the Astros, you're playing for the World Series. You made it this far, go win it. Want to hear from you guys. 866, say ESPN, 866-729-3776. We'll break this game down, give credit where credit's due, and also check and see how things crumbled so fast here for the Cleveland Indians. And what was supposed to be a team of destiny, how now they're going home and left asking themselves why and how they even got to this point. Dodgers, meantime, are waiting for their next opponent. Cubs-Nats tonight, a game number 5. Strasburg, give him credit. All jokes aside, the mold, the seasonal allergies, whatever was ailing him. All right, he went out there and pitched a freaking gem out at Wrigley Field yesterday. Can the Nats finally get over the hump and win a series, get out of the first round, dethrone the world champs? Wouldn't that be something? In a matter of a couple of nights, you can have both World Series participants from a year ago out if the Nats are able to get it done. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen tonight. Plus, we'll get into all the National Football League matters. Our pal Herm Edwards is going to join us as well, go around the league with him. We're with you till 3 o'clock. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I'm so happy, I feel like I can fly.
Disclaimer, you will not be able to fly by switching to Geico. This is against the laws of physics and nature. If you find yourself flying, please seek professional and or medical help immediately. In the unlikely event you find yourself flying, you might be a superhero, or a pigeon, or a superhero named Pidgewoman, who was bitten by a radioactive pigeon. If you are indeed Pidgewoman, Geico retains all licensing publishing rights in the event Pidgewoman the movie becomes a top-grossing Hollywood blockbuster.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Graca filling in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. 866-ESPN. That's the telephone number, 866-729-3776. You could also tweet at me, at Dan Graca. And again, folks, it's a crapshoot, right? We talk about it year in and year out. Just get into the playoffs. It's one thing to go out there and not win, but just in the manner in which you fall apart. And you look at the Cleveland Indians, right? I mean, this is a team that had the best fielding percentage in all the American League this year. 987 clip. All right, they were nearly flawless all season long when it came to catching the baseball. 5-game series, they made 9 errors. 9. Including a couple of costly ones last night. They were booting the ball all around Yankee Stadium in game number 4 back on Monday. That's why the Yankees scored 6 unearned runs. You just never know when your game is going to fall apart. And the Yankees took advantage of it and give them full marks for that. All right, let's see what you guys think here. 866-ESPN telephone number. We'll start it off with Joey in L.A. Joe, you're batting leadoff here on ESPN Radio.
Morning, Dan. Joey from L.A. How is everything going?
Joe, things are great, buddy. Talk to me. What's on your mind?
You know what? The state of the Yankees is what's on my mind. And you know what? I know all the talk is going to be around Aaron Judge and what he did at the plate this season, Luis Severino, what he did as a starter in that bullpen. But none of it would have been possible without the GM, Brian Cashman, and his patience over the last few years.
No, none whatsoever. And as we said, are the Yankees still playing baseball right now if Cashman does not go out there and make the trade to bring in the additional arms in the bullpen? And I know that Jaime Garcia and Sonny Gray didn't necessarily factor in too much into this series per se, but with all the moves that Todd Frazier, those moves, if they are not made, the Yankees are not still playing baseball. That's a fact.
Oh, I agree with you 100% on that, Dan. And, and I feel like Todd Frazier, until this series, kind of got lost in those acquisitions. And he may not have put up the biggest numbers, but you can make an argument that right now he is the best number 9 hitter in baseball. He's a good clubhouse guy. The whole thumbs down thing started with him. And these guys, they're just having fun. They got nothing to lose.
No, they have nothing to lose, but you know what? You want to win, Joe. You want to win.
Damn
you
right.
made it this far. You want to go beat the Houston Astros, and why not? And look, Houston's a really, really good team. I don't know how many of you watch the Astros on a night-in, night-out basis or follow the rest of the league. Hey, Cleveland was really, really good. The Astros are really, really good. In my opinion, they were 1-1A in the American League this year, maybe even in all of baseball. And I thought that we were headed towards an Astros-Indians ALCS, and to me, that was almost for all the marbles. I was treating that like the World Series because I thought whoever emerged from that would be a favorite, even over the Dodgers, in the Fall Classic. We're not going to get it, though, but the Yankees have put themselves in a position to at least have a shot.
And, Dan, I couldn't agree with you more either. You've got an MVP candidate in second base in Jose Altuve, partnered up, turning double plays with Carlos Correa, but their big acquisition of Justin Verlander to really shore up the starting rotation, to give them a bona fide playoff ace, and to put Dallas Keuchel at number 2 in that rotation, those Astros are good. But, hey, we were saying the same thing about Bauer and Kluber, and look what happened to them. It's pinstripe time, baby.
Joe, you're so right. Thank you for the phone call, and enjoy this one. And you're right. Same thing. Give the Astros credit, too. Give Jeff Luhnow, the general manager, credit. If they don't go out there and bring in Justin Verlander, they may not still be playing. Because the Astros got off to that ridiculously hot start. The 3 big teams in baseball this year, Houston, Cleveland, and the Dodgers, they all went through their different spurts of the season, kind of carrying the torch around MLB as the dominant team. Beginning part of the season was the Astros, who jumped out of the gate in the first couple of months, built that 20-game lead in the AL West. They never looked back again. Then in the middle of the summer there, you had the Dodgers, who went on that crazy streak. What was it, winning, 30 out of 32 games or something ridiculous like that. Then at the tail end of the year, it was the Indians. Right, but the Astros, they kind of went through their bump in the road in the middle part of the summer when Keuchel went on the DL, when Lance McCullers went on the DL. They had to take a guy like Brad Peacock and insert him into the starting rotation. If they didn't go out there and get Verlander, I don't know if they have enough starting pitching to even make it this far. I mean, they were going to get in because the AL West was long gone, but I don't even know if they survived the Boston Red Sox. And Verlander, by the way, has been sensational. Absolutely sensational for them since coming over. The guy's pitched to a sub-1 ERA. So the Yanks are going to have their hands full here. They really are. Let's say hi to Jimmy in Jersey. He's up next. Jimmy, you're on ESPN Radio. How you doing?
Hey, how are you? I just wanted to address real quick. Everyone, we're watching all these games on like worldwide coverage or whatever. I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that it's on worldwide coverage or whatever, but everyone keeps saying, every time they go up against Kluber, the Yankees, every time they go up against Kluber, they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance. Every single time they went up against him, which was only twice in the postseason, he looked like garbage.
Right.
I don't know, and everyone is so quick to say that he was off. Doesn't it have something to do with that the Yankees were good too? Doesn't it have something to do with that the Yankees were playing so well themselves that they were able to knock him out so early, or what, did he really just have 2 completely terrible games?
Jim, I'll say it's a combination of both. All right, now look, if you're a Yankee fan, you don't want to hear excuses that Kluber wasn't right, and they haven't made any excuses. But I would be stunned, okay, and this is somebody that covers baseball all year. I do baseball shows on MLB, okay? But to me, and Kluber's going to win the Cy Young Award. Once we get into November and hand out the individual awards, he will win the Cy Young Award because it's a regular season award, and the guy was the best pitcher in the American League during the regular season. All right, the guy pitched to a .8 ERA in the month of September. He was lights out. I believe that there was something physically wrong with him. And I know that Terry Francona, and remember, Terry got a lot of heat at the beginning of this series when he decided to go Bauer game 1 and Kluber game 2. And you say, oh, yeah, well, it gives him that extra rest and it lines him up for a game 5 potentially. I think, and they're never going to come right out and say it, he was also doing it to help him because he was nursing something. I don't know what it was, but he wasn't 100%. Now, give the Yankees credit because they took advantage of it. But I don't think you saw the best of Corey Kluber in this series. I really don't believe that.
And do you think that Verlander is going to give them as much of trouble as Kluber was supposed to give them?
Here's the scary thing about the Astros, okay? As you know, and Jimmy, thank you for the phone call, the Yankees are not exactly a friend of Dallas Keuchel and vice versa, okay? Keuchel does a nice job against them. Really, really good. If he's on his game and he does what he normally does to the Yankees, that's problematic because Verlander is in such a groove right now. All right, and Verlander has almost supplanted Keuchel as the number 1 pitcher for the Astros. But Keuchel's going to get to start game 1 because Verlander, remember, had to come out of the bullpen on Monday in relief. So you'll get him on game 2 Saturday. Yanks are going to have their hands full. But you know what? No starting rotation in baseball was better this year than the Cleveland Indians. And you saw what the Yankees did to them. And they were healthy, at least as far as we're led to believe. Right? They had 3 guys who won 18 games. No other team in baseball could make that claim. Yanks beat them. So you don't have to face Justin Verlander every game. You don't have to face Dallas Keuchel every game. Go get that split first. Hey, my advice, don't dig yourself an 0-2 hole and play with fire like you did against the Indians. You're not going to be able to engineer these crazy comebacks every time. Go get a split down there in Houston. Not impossible. But also, they didn't factor into the game last night. Let's also give credit where credit is due. Yankees still aren't playing if Masahiro Tanaka doesn't give you a gem in game 3, right? Yankees are not playing if Luis Severino doesn't bounce back the way he did in game number 4. Remember all the question marks before game 4, right? What's Severino going to give you? He was in the wild card game. He only got 1 out. Maybe the postseason is just too big a stage for him. He silenced all the doubters. But they got to go out there and pitch. It's no secret. Pitching wins this time of year. It really, really does. Pitching wins. Those guys got to go out there and hold up their end. I got some issues with the lineup, too, if you can nitpick about certain things. And I'm going to do that because, hey, we got time to kill, right? We're here, you and I. We're having a conversation. I got my issues with the manager and the way he's making out the lineup card, in particular with one thing. And I've been screaming about it all week, and I guess he hasn't heard me because he hasn't made the changes yet either. 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Continuing Yankee talk, it's Dan Grass in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Grass in for Stephen A. right here on ESPN Radio. 866-SAY-ESPN's the telephone number, 866-729-3776. How do they start those 30 for 30 shows, or what are they in the promos? What do they say? They say, what if I told you? Well, what if I told you that in the series against the Cleveland Indians, Aaron Judge would set a postseason record and strike out 16 times and have 3 games with 4 strikeouts? Do you think the Yankees would win? Probably not. Probably not. That's why you got to play the games, as they say. Now, my one nitpick, though, and I alluded to this earlier, with Joe Girardi in the lineup. I don't know if he's hurt, and I know that clearly he spent some time on the shelf in the second half of the season, and he wasn't right, and he was fighting through an illness and other ailments and whatnot. But somebody's got to explain to me, all right, Joe Girardi himself or somebody, if Matt Holliday is on this roster, and he was in the ALDS, I don't know what he's going to be in the ALCS, why did you not at least give him an opportunity to be the designated hitter in one of these games? I don't get it. How many more times do we have to watch Jacoby Ellsbury go up there, and the only thing he was making contact with was the catcher's mitt, right? Same thing with Chase Headley. Combined, they were 0 for the series. 0 for the series. Why is Matt Holliday not getting a look? Now, it didn't come back to bite him. They won. They're moving on. I get it. But if he's on the roster, what is he doing taking up a spot on the bench? At least put it to use with somebody who maybe has a threat of getting into the game. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Now, I don't know if Holliday's going to be on the roster for the ALCS. Remains to be seen. But if not, why don't you put Clint Frazier on the roster if he's healthy enough? Let him be the designated hitter. How many times do we have to see these two guys go out there and just stink up the joint? Don't you want some productivity? Otherwise, you might as well just bend down and give up the at-bat. Right? Pass it off. Like, nah, we're not even going to bother. Let the next guy go. We'll just chalk it up to an automatic out, because basically that's what it is. Let's go to Chris in Long Island. Chris, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, Dan. How you doing?
What's up, Chris?
Not too much. I got 2 points I want to make, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so I'm a Mets fan, lifelong Mets fan, diehard. And I got to say, the first thing, this Yankee team is a really easy team to root for. And they're doing everything that I wish the Mets hitters would do. I mean, they come back, clutch down 0-2. It's pretty unbelievable to see. And, you know, we hold on to everything as Mets fans. We never forget a thing, you know. So all of a sudden seeing these young Yankees making this happen, I can't really hate. There's nothing to hate on this team right now as a Mets fan. So that's the first point I want to make. And
let me say this. It's funny you bring that up, Chris, because I got a text message last night from somebody after the game when Cleveland lost, and they said, a Met fan, and they said, well, maybe this increases our chances of getting Jay Bruce back.
The same thing I thought. Exactly. If he won a World Series with them, he would never leave that team. I wouldn't.
I don't know. It's all going to come down to the color green. You know that, Chris.
Yeah, of course. So my second point is my dad is actually a Yankees fan, and my grandfather is as well. He's a veteran of World War II. He's actually right now not doing well at all. So I've been rooting for the Yankees really this past month, and to see them on this run, it actually hits home for us because, you know, watching them win and seeing my dad happy, they're really, you know, doing a really nice thing here. And, you know, it just shows you life is, you know, life goes beyond baseball, and I'm really happy for them because just watching my dad's face, watching them win this was a really big deal. So, you know, just want to kind of thank the Yankees for that too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know what, Chris? Well said, and you know we're sending our best out to you and the family, and that's what sports is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be a distraction from our everyday lives, and if you're fortunate enough to root for a team, that gives you a lot of enjoyment. And look, if you're a Yankee fan, you've had a lot of enjoyment, you've had a lot of happy days for the better part of your life as a Yankee fan. At least certainly, depending on how old you are, if you're a Yankee fan the last 25 years, you've had a lot of happy days. But that's the relief that sports brings. So if you're a Yankee fan, you certainly live this one up for sure. Chris, thank you for the phone call. Let's say hi to Kevin. He's up next. He's in the great state of New Jersey. Kev, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, good morning. It's a very good day.
What's up, Kev?
I'm a huge Yankee fan, man. Huge Yankee fan. I'm 40,
Did you go to sleep at all last night?
Not at all, man. It was a great night, great day. I just have a question for you.
Yeah.
Flaherty said it after the Minnesota game. I think that Gardner, he's of course they're not going to call him a captain, because after Jeter, but he's like the unsung leader of that team, and I think he's the reason why they have such a camaraderie. Like, he was the guy that was like putting the pies in the faces a few years ago. Like, I think that everybody looks up to him, and I really think it would have changed the atmosphere of this team if they traded him this year. Like, he had such a good year. I'm not one of those Yankee fans that I start pointing fingers when they lose. You know what I mean? This year would have been great if they lost to the Indians. I mean, Judge's, what he did with the home run, the way things just went on with this year was amazing. I had such a fun year. Like, even like in the 90s when we were rocking. Like, this year was just different, man, because I had no expectations. All the young guys coming up, I got to see what they did, and I just truly feel that, like, Didi hit 2 home runs last night, but who was on base for one of them? And then Gardner, sealing the deal at the end of the game. How many times did he do that this year? There's games where he was winning games by himself, in triples, home runs to win the game, to walk-offs, this and that. And I just really feel that, like, Gardner doesn't get the credit he deserves. I really do. Like, I think, like, him just being the leader of that team, bringing that atmosphere, brings everybody's, like, blood pressure down so that they can play right. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Kev, you're preaching to the choir, and I thank you for the phone call. You're absolutely right about that. Just as much as we want to sit here and talk about Didi as, when I called him the Yankees MVP, if you will, Brett Gardner is right there with him. I mean, let's be honest. He is one of the unsung heroes, a guy who just goes about his business. And as you said, Yankee fans, they couldn't wait to get this guy off the team in the last couple of years. Off season, we got to trade Gardner. We got to free up some room in the outfield for all the big money contracts and some of these guys coming through the pipeline. Where would they be without Brett Gardner? And we haven't even talked about how important his at-bat was last night in the ninth inning. And forgive me for glancing over it, but I didn't do it intentionally. That 12-pitch at-bat, that is just emblematic of this Yankee team as a whole. I mean, to fight off pitch after pitch after pitch after pitch. And I'll tell you, whether or not you were confident or not in Aroldis Chapman, and it was kind of a risk-reward type thing, because the longer that Gardner at-bat went, and Frazier right before his, mind you. Okay, that was a big at-bat by Frazier. But it just kept prolonging the top half of the ninth inning. And then the cameras kept showing Aroldis Chapman sitting on the bench, waiting to get back out there to get the last 3 outs and to wrap this thing up for the Yankees. John Smoltz, a Hall of Fame pitcher in his own right, held down the closer's role for a while, as you know. He even said it on the broadcast. He said, you know what? People probably don't realize this unless you've been in those shoes, but what Aroldis Chapman is going through right now, and the fact that he's having to sit and having to wait to get back out on the mound, that is not conducive to being a closer. So you had a little bit of that worried feeling, but the fact that they tacked on those insurance runs made you probably feel a little bit more confident in the fact that he wasn't going out there having to protect a one-run lead. He had a little bit of a cushion to play with there. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Yankees, the conversation. Football next hour. Of course, Herm Edwards going to join me. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. Talking baseball, talking Yanks, 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776, telephone number you want to be part of the program. Remember, we do have a game number 5 tonight out in the nation's capital with the Cubs and the Nats. Give Washington a ton of credit. Give Steven Strasburg a ton of credit for the game that he pitched yesterday, the gem, whether he was sick, whether he wasn't sick, whether he was supposed to pitch, whether it was on him, whether it was the organization, whether it was peer pressure, whatever it was. You know what? He took the baseball, and you don't have to question Steven Strasburg anymore because the Nationals wouldn't have a season if not for him and the way he performed yesterday at Wrigley Field. And I just have a feeling. See, normally, all right, they're coming home tonight. They have all the momentum. You think there's no way the Nationals are going to lose this game tonight. Well, guess again. Remember, this is a franchise that's never been past the first round, and there's always seems to be something which gets in the way of them. Dusty Baker, of course, right, the snake-bitten manager, the guy who, goes to different franchises, wins divisions, gets them into the postseason, but he still has never been able to win that World Series. He's Gene Mauch. That's what Dusty is. He's Gene Mauch. Okay, so all those things adding up, and you wonder, will the Nats find a way tonight against a team that's the defending champs? I know they're not as good as they were last year. I know they're not as good, but they know what it takes to win these big games. And when have you ever said that about the Chicago Cubs before, right up until last season? But Kyle Hendricks tonight, who pitched really well in his first start in this series, up against the guy in Gio Gonzalez, who has the potential to spin a big game. I had a feeling back on Monday. I said, leave it to the Nats. It would be the complete Nats thing to do for them to win a game 4 on the road and then to go back home and lose a game number 5 in front of their fans. That's why I think the Cubbies win tonight. I think the Cubbies are going to find a way to set up a Cubs-Dodgers rematch in the NLCS. And if you're a Dodger fan, I think that plays well into your hands. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Continue the Yankee talk, though. Luke in New York is up next here on ESPN Radio. What's up, Luke?
Dan, great show, man.
What's up, Luke?
Hey, what do you think about the Yankees lineup? You think they're maximizing it? I think you hit the nail on the head with the DH. They really got no productivity out of them in that series.
Well, again, it's tough to nitpick. Like, I've been getting tweets from folks and, saying we got to get Judge going in the next round or else we don't stand a shot. And that's all well and good. But it's tough to sit here again and really find fault with anything because they still found a way to win. They still produced enough timely hits, right, when it mattered the most. Now, one thing you want to do is you want to cut down on the strikeouts because even if you don't have that's why a team like you saw the Kansas City Royals, right, when they went to the World Series 2 years in a row, they didn't have a lot of big boppers in their lineup. They weren't a home run heavy team. But what they did is they worked the count. They gave you a lot of good professional at-bats, and most importantly, they didn't strike out. And And I know nowadays things are so screwy in baseball that they actually value strikeouts from an offensive standpoint. But, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I would look to address the DH position, though, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, because you're literally getting zero production from that one spot. And you've tried two different guys. Why not inject somebody else? This is win or go home time for you.
Where's Matt Holliday in the picture?
Where you asked me. I'd love to know. I wish we could get Joe Girardi on the phone. I know he's busy, and I know he's preoccupied, but if you're not going to have Matt Holliday, I want to see what he does with the roster here for the LCS. If not Holliday, let me see Clint Frazier. What's Clint Frazier up to? Put him up there. I don't care that he's a rookie. Give him a shot.
Are you keeping Sanchez and Judge in the top four of the lineup?
Look. I know that Judge hit in the 2-hole for most of the season, and he did a lot of damage. I like Didi hitting third. I like where Didi's at right now. But a lot of it is also, if you want to talk about lengthening this lineup, a lot of it is going to depend on Greg Bird as well. Now, Greg Bird, of course, got a hold of one on Sunday night and had the big hit that really made all the difference in that game. But I need to see a little bit more from him, because if you're going to stick him in that 5-hole and have him be the protection, if you will, for somebody like Gary Sanchez, if both of those guys are struggling, it really does not benefit either one of those two guys.
Are you giving Bird a shot in the top 4 spots of the lineup?
No, I'd leave him where he is, and if I would do anything with Bird, I would think to drop him down a peg. But as I said, I kind of like when you have Castro and Hicks hitting 6th and 7th, it lengthens the lineup out a little bit because you're getting nothing from your designated hitters. I need some protection down there at the bottom of that lineup. You can't just roll it over and be a top-heavy lineup, or else you're not going to get very far.
So what were they doing last night if Chapman struggled in the 9th?
If Chapman struggles in the 9th and you're playing and you're going extra innings, you mean? If Cleveland comes back and ties the game?
They get a couple runners on against him, and it gets dicey.
Oh, it would have been sink or swim time, Luke, and thank you for the phone call. I mean, Girardi made his bed with Chapman. As soon as he went to him for the 8th inning and said, here you go, get me the final 6 outs, we're paying you $86 million or whatever it is, it was going to be his game. We'll switch gears, talk a little NFL with Herm Edwards. Coming up, it's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Channel 80 and the ESPN app.
Hey girl, have you done something new with your scales? Using new moisturizer? Nice. It really brings out the hazel in your eyes. Oh, hold on. Are you using whitening strips too? Your fangs look good, girl. Really good.
A really charming snake charmer? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Wait, what? Have you been doing Pilates too?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
I'm Jody Avirgan. Have you heard of Blue Apron? Well, now you have. Blue Apron's mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. The country's #1 fresh ingredient and recipe service, fresh, high-quality ingredients make the difference, so it's important to know where your food comes from. Plus, it's affordable, easy, and full of surprises. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals for free with free shipping. You will love how good it tastes and feels to create home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait. Go to blueapron.com/30 for 30.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Welcome back. Dan Graca filling in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. Week 6, if you can actually believe it, begins tonight in the National Football League. The Eagles head down to Carolina to take on the Panthers. We'll get into that and a whole lot more with our next guest. He, of course, NFL insider for us here at ESPN. It is the great Herm Edwards. Herm, Dan Graca, good to talk to you. You feel the football excitement already?
Well, you do, and I think now that a month has passed us by during the season, you're starting to figure out that this league is pretty comparable. There's no team that you can say right now is running away with whatever division they're in, and the fact that it's been pretty competitive now. Some people will say, well, it's been bad football. I don't know that so much. I think it's been football early. I've always said this, the first 4 games of the season, they're like preseason games anymore, except they count. And the fact that the varsity players play now. They haven't played a whole lot in the preseason, so you kind of find out who you are early in the first 4 games of the season, and then from there you got to adjust and start playing games.
Very true indeed. Let's start, though, with the Giants. And, I mean, to say that they're a disaster on multiple levels, I think would be putting it mildly right now. And, I mean, to implode in 5 weeks, as drastic as it's been, I don't think something like that happens overnight. Where do you think the problems for what has befallen the Giants can be traced back to?
Well, obviously, just in free agency alone, they made a lot of choices as far as going in the defensive side of the football. Brought in a lot of good players, paid a lot of money on that side of the ball. This year, they went into the mindset of that we want to upgrade our receivers. Obviously, bring in Brandon Marshall, draft a young tight end, had Shepard that was there the previous year. Beckham. We know all the guys, the coach of players. Didn't do a lot at the running back position. Didn't do a lot at the offensive line position. Now, with that being said, they were a team that just figures, you know what, we got a quarterback here, a veteran guy, we're going to throw it, get it out of our hand, we're going to attempt about 40 passes a game, and we're going to be good because we got a good defense, and this is what we know. Didn't work out so good thus far. And you look at their season, the last 3 games especially have been lost by 5 points, 2 points, 3 points. I mean, if they win those games and they're sitting there at 3-2 and no one's saying a whole lot, but now they're 0-5, struggling, lost a lot of the players on offense, especially at the wide receiver position. Now, where do they go from here? Because they don't have a running game per se. Their defense, which was very good last year, is not the same defense. It's just not. When you look at the numbers, it's not even comparable. I mean, they're 26th in total defense, 29th against the run. Those are not good numbers. They're a team that in the first half is outscored 66-26. So they're in a catch-up mode after halftime and doesn't bode well for them.
You know, Herm, too, you talk about the changes that were made. And I think if you go all the way back to the summertime, you started to see that the ingredients were there for this potentially to become a combustible situation, right? And I'm talking about off the field in the locker room if there wasn't success on the field necessarily. And clearly that has been the case. It has been a worst-case scenario for this football team. And a lot of it has now fallen on the shoulders of Ben McAdoo, who's the head coach. And you had this job for a lot of years. You know what it's like to try to keep 53 guys or however many it is in line and all be pulling together. Do you think that Ben McAdoo is necessarily over his head in terms of being a leader of men to coach this football team?
Well, I don't know if he's over his head. I do know this. This is where your relationships come in with players. And I've always said this as a coach. They're not just numbers on the back of a jersey. They're men. And how you foster relationships during your tenure as a coach is very important. Because there's going to be days like this where you go through periods of times where it's not good, and you feel like no one in the building is listening. When you go in the locker room, it feels like, well, what's going on in here? And everyone's telling you how to basically fix your team, right? I mean, that's what everybody's telling you. From outside, everybody's telling you that. Well, you got to have enough conviction and enough relationships with the players in that locker room where they trust only one voice, and it's yours. And that you bring them hope. That's what you do when you struggle. You have to provide hope and answers. And I think going forward now, it's going to test this whole staff on what they can do to be competitive and go try to win a football game.
For all intents and purposes, this season probably can't be salvaged where they are right now. And then you throw in the fact that the injuries and losing such key members of their roster, there's no way they can get back into contention here. So there's going to have to be some changes made. Do you feel that this team, once the offseason arrives, needs to make a clean break? And when I say a clean break, I'm not just talking about the coaching staff, the front office. How about even at quarterback, where Eli Manning, not getting any younger, of course, do major changes have to be in store for this Giants team?
Well, I think it depending on how they finish up, and we don't know yet. I mean, it's just like when the season kind of started, we can all kind of reflect on when the season started, and there was 2 teams in New York, and the one that wore green, they had no shot. People were saying they're going to tank because they had no talent. They're going to tank, right? Got a 37-year-old quarterback. Look, they're waiting to draft a quarterback, and they're going to tank. They got rid of a bunch of players, and lo and behold, they're tied for the division lead. So I just think, sometimes we get into this and we think, we got to change this if you change that. Well, they went the opposite. They got rid of all their veteran guys and brought in a veteran quarterback and said, you know what, we're going to play with these guys. We're going to be competitive. And all of a sudden you win a game, guess what? And you gain confidence. And that's all this team needs to do is win a game. They got enough talent now. I mean, look, the team that's right across, down the road, they're playing with defense. They know the only chance they got right now is to survive it is play defense. Just play defense and just play as hard as you can and set your offense up for success, and maybe we can win some games. Well, the strength of this team right now, the Giants, is their defense. Why do I say that? When you look at how they played last year, a lot of those players are still on that football team. They got to decide collectively as players. Got nothing to do with the coaches anymore. How do we want to finish this, man? How we want to do this? How do we want to remember this season? How do we want to go down? Because there's a lot of football left. And we're good enough on defense, guys. We can't say we're not good enough on defense because we are good enough on defense. We're going to have to lead the team. And let's go play. Let's go have some fun and play.
Herm Edwards, our guest here on ESPN Radio. And you mentioned the Jets. Isn't it funny, the role reversal, Herm? And you alluded to it, too, that this time last year, everybody had one foot out the door for Todd Bowles, and, the Jets had to go in a new direction. And lo and behold, what you see, I think, with this team this year is that they rid themselves of a lot of those personalities and headaches, if you will, in that locker room. They're doing it with young talent. And all of a sudden, I don't know if this is sustainable. There still is some doubts, of course, at least for 2017. But you at least have to be encouraged to some degree that this organization is headed in the right direction, and lo and behold, maybe, just maybe, Todd Bowles should be the guy to oversee it.
Well, you make a great point, and I just think eventually this is why I say relationships are important, because eventually as a coach, you want the players to run the locker room. You really do. And you want them to hold each other accountable. And when you have a locker room like that, then you just say, okay, let's go. Let's go play. Because the players, when they hold each other accountable, they don't listen to anybody else. They go, hey, man, you know what? We're going to get this done. I don't know how it's going to finish, boys, but we're going to make sure when we turn the tape on, we watch each other play. We know we're playing for each other. And whatever the score is going to be. But we can't do the other thing and go the other way. We're accountable to each other. And these Giants can still do that. I mean, there's a lot of football left. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we think we know. I mean, 4 weeks from now, in the third quarter of the season, we'll look at some of these teams that are sitting here at 3-2, some at 4-1 maybe, and we'll go, what happened to those guys? And we'll see a team that's 2-2, kind of sitting on the brink going, how do they win these games? And all of a sudden they're leading their division.
Let's flip out west here for a second, Herman. How about the Rams? I mean, young coach and Sean McVay, and look, that was a game on Sunday they probably should have won. I mean, Cooper Kupp holds on to that ball in the end zone. They knock off the Seahawks. They're in first place by themselves. And, there's some other teams, of course, Arizona and San Francisco, which are having their struggles. Somehow, some way, chalk it up to just the parity of the NFL. But the Rams, as we speak, have a shot probably to win this NFC West, don't you think?
They do. I did their first game on ESPN Radio. And watched them play. And I said after the first week, I chuckled. I said, well, okay, guess what? And I said, who would ever thunk this, that after the first week of play in the NFC West, the Rams are in first place? That was a chuckle. Like, okay, the Rams are in first place. Well, guess what? Until last week, I said, guess who's still in first place? It's the Rams. and they're playing pretty good. They really are. They've got a nice offense defensively. They got some stars over there. They're in a division now that Seattle, Seattle beat them. So now all of a sudden Seattle's kind of coming alive like they always do. But look, this Ram team is no joke. This is a big game for them, by the way. This week, going on the road, this is another big game for them. And the quarterback is playing well. He is playing good.
I think it's a big game for both teams, them and Jacksonville, right? I mean, it's kind of like both teams looking to take that next step, see if they're for real. I agree with you. That's really going to be one worth watching coming up on Sunday. What about the game tonight? Obviously, the quarterbacks are going to be front and center. You see the progression with Carson Wentz in year 2. And, Cam Newton, I thought, did a nice job at putting aside all the distractions from the previous week and going out there and playing a good road football game and getting a win in Detroit. These two teams, let's be honest, they have eyes on January, and I think that tonight should be a fun matchup.
Should be two teams that are 4-1. And when you think about Carson Wentz, started out last year hot. This year, it looks like a different team. I think Blunt has helped them tremendously as far as their balance in their offense right now. This is a big game for both teams, but maybe a bigger game for Philadelphia when you think about where they're at right now. Last year, wins against winning teams was 5-7. Okay, it was 5-7 against winning teams. Now, that being said, this year they've won 3 in a row. The combined win-loss record for those teams was 3-12. So this is a team that they're playing. It's 4-1. Good football team, by the way. Has accomplished a lot of things. Now, last year was a bad year. Cam Newton's starting to play like an MVP the last 2 games. So, this is kind of testing the water, where you're at. Okay, where are we really at? We're going to play a team that's got the same record we do. Pretty good football team. How do we stack up? And we got to go on the road to do it. So this is going to be fun to watch.
Last thing here, Herm. Were you surprised in any way at what number 12 in Green Bay, the rabbit that he pulled out of his hat there in Dallas again? Herm, look, and you saw it up close for a lot of years. Brady's great. He's got all these rings. But I'll tell you, I don't know if anybody who has ever played this game and played that position has done it better than the guy in Green Bay right now.
Yeah, he's special. I don't say that because I went to Cal. He's a special guy. And I said this from the beginning. When he lost his 2 tackles and he played Atlanta, I said, how are they even in this game? His 2 tackles are standing on the sideline with street clothes on. And they're playing Atlanta Falcons on the road. Mm-hmm. And I said, how are they even in the game? Because it's him. It's 12. And if he has the ball at the end, you anticipate, you know what? This is bad for the opponent because he's going to find a way to score now. I mean, it's almost like the first 3 weeks of the season when he didn't have any offensive linemen. He was playing street ball. He was just saying, hike me the ball, guys, and I'll run around. You get open, and I'll find you, and I'll throw you the ball. And when we watched the Dallas game, as soon as they scored, I'm sitting there going, this ain't good, boys, because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen, and we all waited there and saying it's going to happen, but going, no, it really can't happen again, can it? Yeah, it happened again.
It's amazing, and he always gives you a fighting chance, that's for sure. Herm, appreciate a couple of minutes, as always. Enjoy the game tonight. Enjoy it this weekend. We'll be watching.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, Herm Edwards, NFL analyst here for ESPN. We'll get more into the National Football League, too, when we return. 866-ESPN is the telephone number. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I've never felt more alive.
Disclaimer. Geico cannot guarantee you will feel more alive. You either possess functioning respiratory and circulatory systems, or you do not, or you are a zombie. If you are indeed a brain-starved zombie and you would like to save money on car insurance, the Geico legal team applauds your excellent life choices, even in your shambling afterlife. But we strongly encourage you to visit geico.com or download the Geico app. Please stay a minimum of 500 feet away from our large and presumably delicious, delicious brains.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca holding it down for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. We'll take you till the top of the hour at 866-ESPN, 867-299-3776. Our thanks to Herm Edwards for joining us. And it's funny, when you look at the National Football League right now, and we'll segue into that for a little bit. When the schedule came out, and if you looked at just the Week 6 matchups that we have this weekend, if I would have told you that instead of Giants-Broncos, which is the Sunday night game this weekend, boy, the NBC folks are probably loving that one. If I would have told you that Jets-Pats would have been the more appealing matchup rather than Giants-Broncos, you probably would have thought I was crazy. But let's be honest, if you want to talk about a game involving a New York team, Jets-Pats is probably the better one, at least more competitive than what the Giants have just deteriorated into over the first month plus of this season. And there's no other way to slice it. I mean, the Giants are clearly the runaway winner right now for most disappointing in the National Football League, and they are going to be hard-pressed to be beaten in that regard. And you don't think it could get any worse, but then you're reminded of something that happens yesterday with DRC going MIA, and he's not going to be playing this week. And then you just realize, if you want to term it, the inmates are running the asylum and that the coach has no control over what's going on and so on and so forth. But that's clearly the case right now for the New York Giants. And the injuries are just one small part of it, because remember, things were not operating as they should even before you had the disaster on Sunday when Odell went down, when Brandon Marshall went down, and on and on and on. Everybody at the wide receiver position. I mean, this team, this locker room is a fractured unit right now. And I don't think necessarily that you could just chalk it up to, oh, it's Ben McAdoo. He's going to get the lion's share of the blame, as he should, because he's the head coach, right? Ultimately, everything should run across him. But the problems with this organization and everything that has befallen them, really you can even trace it back to the end of Tom Coughlin's reign there. And Tom Coughlin, who clearly is going to be remembered as a guy who was a strict disciplinarian, buck stops with me, no-nonsense coach, fining guys because they're 5 minutes early for a meeting, or so on and so forth. You know, you're not early enough, or at least on the Coughlin clock. That guy was gone by the end of his reign as the Giants head coach. And you have the infamous Odell Beckham episode against Josh Norman and the Carolina Panthers late in that season, where Odell Beckham embarrassed not only himself, but the Giants organization and anything that stands with that logo and that uniform. And Coughlin was powerless on the sidelines and did nothing to rein the guy in. And remember when he was asked about it after the game, he said, what do you want me to do, take him out of the game? Well, yeah, anything to prove a point. And it just began to deteriorate after that, slowly but surely. And it was almost like Odell Beckham has held this organization hostage for the last few years, right? With very little winning in between. Playoff appearance last year notwithstanding. I get all those things. And as I said, the injuries and everything that took place last Sunday at the Meadowlands, that's secondary to this point. Because there is now a culture issue with the New York Giants. And I don't know how many other times in the past you have been able to say that about this football team. You know, they were always a classy organization, right? They have that reputation. But when you see the antics of Odell Beckham on the field, and he's uncontrollable. And then you had, of course, the episode last year with Josh Brown, and the fact that the organization was hush-hush over it, and wasn't exactly forthright when we all found out about what Josh Brown was up to, and why they decided to give him a contract extension and bring him back. And if you remember, they left Ben McAdoo out there to dry and left him out there to answer all of these questions as to why the organization decided to continue to employ a guy who was a domestic abuser, right? Jerry Reese didn't have to speak. They held Jerry Reese up in his office, and he didn't have to come down. He didn't have to tell the side of the story for the organization. So Ben McAdoo has been put in a very difficult position. Now, look, do I think he's a good head coach? Absolutely not. I'm not sitting here and defending Ben McAdoo, but my point is that it does not all fall on him. There is a lot of other avenues that you can assign blame to in deciding where this New York Giants franchise has gone in completely the other direction. McAdoo's only one piece. You know, I asked Herm, is he over his head as a head coach? Well, if you don't want to call it he's over his head, you know, you can use whatever term you want to. But to me, he looks like somebody who might have a little bit too much on his plate right now. Little bit too much on his plate. And where do you go from here? You know, let's just say they decide to clean house. And you know what? That might be in the offing. Because as I said, I don't know how this season is getting any better for them. They're not making the playoffs. You know, if they rally the troops and somehow go 7-9, 8-8 to finish the season, I mean, does that buy McAdoo another year? I don't know. But for argument's sake, let's just say they continue down this spiral. And at the end of the year, if I'm John Mara, if I'm Steve Tisch, I'm going to look at my football operations and say, well, you know what? With the exception of one playoff run last year, which we were one and done in Green Bay, things have gotten pretty poor. And we need to shake things up. Eli Manning's not getting any younger. And not to say that Eli's been a problem in any way. All right, his legacy is intact. He's got 2 Super Bowl MVPs. But you begin to wonder, and if they're going to have a really high draft choice, if you have a quarterback prospect in the draft that's staring you in the face, are you going to pass up the opportunity to take him because you have Eli Manning? Right? Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I bring them up because Eli, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers all came in 2004. All right, did you watch the game that Ben Roethlisberger had on Sunday against Jacksonville when he threw 5 picks, 2 pick sixes? Said after the game, you know what, maybe I just don't have it anymore. But Ben, you know, Ben likes to kind of contort things a little bit. But Ben was also a guy last offseason who said, you know what, this might be it for me. This might be my last year. Eli and Ben, again, came into the NFL same time. So if Ben is already talking about an exit strategy, and you know what, he's been playing like it too, shouldn't the Giants think the same thing about Eli, or at least think of a contingency plan to some degree, at the very least? If I'm making changes, I'm cleaning house. I'm sorry. Jerry Reese, to me, has been living on borrowed time. All right, Jerry Reese went out there, and he had a bunch of cap space last offseason, brought in a bunch of good defensive players. They played well last year. That helped Ben McAdoo out a lot. But how do we know that they wouldn't have had those same results under Tom Coughlin, right? Easily could have. And then my next question is this, and this is going to be a very, very important question for the immediate direction of the New York Giants franchise, or at least for the foreseeable future. Whatever head coach they want to bring in, I don't care who you are. A guy that they want to maybe give his first opportunity to be a head coach, some hotshot coordinator someplace, or maybe they pluck somebody from the college ranks. I don't know. Or maybe they take a recycled coach or a guy who's been on the sidelines for a while and wants to get back in the game. I'm just throwing out names. You know, a John Gruden type, a Bill Cowher, guys like that, even though I don't think that they're going to get back on the sidelines. But whatever head coach decides to take this job, if indeed it becomes open, are they going to have to be saddled with an Odell Beckham? Are they going to have to put up with Odell Beckham's garbage on the field, off the field? Or are they going to allow this head coach to go out there and be a disciplinarian and call the shots and make tough decisions and to get these guys in line and to rein in a locker room which has completely gone chaotic? And the ingredients were there. You bring in some of these veteran personalities, Brandon Marshall being one of them. Not that he is necessarily somebody you point the finger at as why this has all gone downhill, but you had personalities in this locker room that if it started to go bad early on in the season, it could really blow up in their face. And that's exactly what's happened. Look at what happened to the Jets last year. All the locker room squabbles contributed to them losing on the football field. And I don't know if the Jets necessarily have improved their personnel, but you know what they did? They improved their locker room. They improved their locker room, and all the antics and all the garbage and all the chaos that was in Florham Park last year is now in East Rutherford with the New York Giants. 866, say ESPN, 866-729-3776. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. till the top of the hour on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca hanging out with you for Stephen A. till the top of the hour right here on ESPN Radio. 866-ESPN is our number, of course, 866-729-3776. Keep those tweets coming, too, at Dan Graca. You can check me out there. And believe it or not, folks, Week 6 of the NFL underway tonight. Good Thursday night game. You can't say that about all of them, but you got a good one tonight, at least on paper, and you got a battle of first-place teams. You got the Birds, who are heading down to Carolina to take on the Panthers, and give Carolina some credit, too, aside from the Cam Newton stuff with the comments he made and having to deal with all of that stuff. But, you know, Carolina went on the road the last couple of weeks in two places that, you know, are not exactly gimmies. They go to New England, where nobody ever wins, and they beat Brady and the Patriots. They put up 33 points. And then last week they go into Detroit, which, you know, is a very tough team. Never say die, never out of a football game. And they find a way to eke out a field goal win there as well. So you got to like the way this Carolina team has responded, doing all this without Greg Olsen on offense, which, of course, Greg Olsen has become Cam Newton's security blanket and really, really such a big part of it. But it's almost like kind of the reinvention, if you will, of Cam Newton, because he had the shoulder surgery, and this is a guy who's taken a pounding, and we wondered, you know, was he going to reinvent himself as the way he plays the position? Was he going to maybe look to run less, you know, to be able to preserve his body? Because you get older. You know, Cam Newton's been in the league now since, 2011? You know, so this is year number 7 for him, and all the constant pounding that you take playing the quarterback position, and with all the referees into whether or not that they take care of him and protect him with late hits and flags and so on and so forth, it takes its toll. So if he wants to maximize his football life, you almost have to relegate yourself to being more of that pocket passer. They have the weapons. You know, McCaffrey, they've brought him in here and, you know, picked his spots with him, and I think at times he's going to be very valuable for them as we continue on through this season. But if Carolina's going to want to do anything, it's on the strength of that defense. You know, that to me is what's really going to get them far this season. And the NFC South is going to come down to them and the Atlanta Falcons, even though Atlanta, I'll tell you, they're 3-1 right now, coming off of their bye week, and they get Miami coming in, who's a disaster of a football team. But if you look at the Atlanta Falcons right now, they can easily be 1-3 instead of 3-1. Okay, they were very fortunate to win Week 1 in Chicago, where they had to make a stand there on the final play of the game. The game they won in Detroit was by aid of a very, very questionable replay review there at the goal line in the final stages. And then, of course, they lose that game to the Buffalo Bills at home in their brand new stadium a couple of weeks back. So the Falcons really have not clicked on all cylinders, and it's those teams that, lose the Super Bowl, as they say. They come back the next year, and sometimes they struggle. They just can't get over that hump again. So a lot to play there for Carolina. And if you're Philadelphia, the way the NFC East has kind of played itself out here to start, Giants are a mess. Washington is what Washington is. Dallas has come back to the pack a little bit, and they're still working through several things. You got Jerry Jones interjecting himself into the locker room with all this anthem stuff and, maybe a little bit of infighting there. Golden opportunity for Philadelphia. And as Herm said when he was on with us, year 2 Carson Wentz, you're seeing that maturation. Remember, the front office went out there, and they got him some new toys that he could throw the football to. All right? So I expect this Philadelphia team to really be in it, and at this stage, would it be a shock to tell you that the Eagles are going to win the NFC East? They're the leaders in the clubhouse right now, but we still got a lot of football to be played. That's why tonight's going to be a really, really fun football game. On that note, let's go out to Cam right now, who's got some thoughts on tonight's football game. Cam, you're on ESPN Radio. What's going on?
Oh, good. How are you?
Good, Cam. What's up?
I'm talking about tonight's game. I feel like everyone's talking about the Packers and the Falcons. Do you see the winner of this game being one of the two teams that will have a bye week come playoff time?
It's too early to say. It's only week 6. A lot could happen. Remember, and it's cliche. And Cam, thanks for the phone call. The winner of this game, the only thing that they guarantee themselves is that they're going to be no worse than 5-11. Right? Winning 5 games isn't going to get you into the playoffs. And remember, the last couple of seasons, we've had teams get off to unbelievable starts only to just crash and burn and not even make the postseason. If you remember, back in 2016, a year ago, the Vikings started 5-0 and they missed the playoffs. Right? The year before that, it was the Atlanta Falcons in Dan Quinn's first year. I believe they started 5-0, missed the playoffs. Still got a lot of football to play. You can't win anything here in the first month of the season. Joey in L.A. up next. Joe, you're on ESPN Radio. What's up?
Hey, how you doing, Dan? Nice to speak to you again.
What's up, Joe?
You know what, just to talk about the state of the New York Giants, I agree with you. I feel like Jerry Reese is on borrowed time, and Ben McAdoo just does not seem to have the players trusting and believing him. And the most recent piece to that puzzle, obviously, is the indefinite suspension to veteran cornerback Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. And to me, what really sticks out about this is a guy who's been a true professional the last few years, not only taking a back seat to cornerbacks Jenkins and Eli Apple, but also multiple contract restructuring for the better of the team. And if he's lost his cool, something tells me, that this coaching staff just needs to be, if not completely blown up, very close to it coming into this offseason.
Well, Joey, think about this for a second, and I thank you for the phone call. Let's just think about, in essence, what went on here. You had a player, who didn't like the way things were going for him, walk off the field during a game. Walk off the field. When does that happen? Okay, it tells me that anybody with the audacity to make such a move, they don't fear any sort of repercussions that are going to come their way from either the coaching staff, the management, so on and so forth. So to me, that points to a systematic culture problem with the New York Giants. And we keep going back to the inmates running the asylum. Why is that? Is there any respect? Is there any discipline? Is there any repercussions that you have to adhere to if you're going to go out and not do your job and act like a professional? That's unheard of to me. Now, look, the Giants did the only thing that they could do by suspending him. You have to. But it's almost too little too late because it never should have got to that point. Joan in New Jersey up next. Joan, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Hey, Joan. What's going on?
I just have 2 quick questions. What are your thoughts on all the injuries this early in the NFL? And then my second question is, how do you think the U.S. men's national team can turn around not qualifying for the World Cup?
Does anybody have the... I'll tell you, if anybody knew the answer to the U.S. soccer question, they'd probably be a billionaire right now. I don't know if anybody has the answer to that one. Look, it's a simple answer, Joan, okay? And it's one... And look, soccer's near and dear to my heart. Okay, I grew up playing the game for a lot of years. I follow the sport. I like it. And all kidding aside... And I was even tweeting this out the other night when you had that disaster against Trinidad. The fact that the World Cup is going to come around again next summer, and it's one of the best sporting events in the world, the most popular sporting event in the world on a global scale. All right, the fact that you are going to have this tournament and not have the United States be part of it really, really hurts, in my opinion, at least closer to home here. And I know that, look, it's a global game, and there's still a lot of soccer fans who are going to watch. I'm going to watch anyway because you still have great teams and great stars around the world, but not having your home country in it is big. What it comes down to me more than anything else, and why U.S. soccer has never been able to take that next step, we're not developing players at the rate of these other countries. If you go to a country like Argentina, to Spain, to Brazil, to Portugal, to England, any of these other so-called global powers in soccer, soccer is the number one sport there. It's the number two sport, the three sport. You get what I'm saying. They eat, breathe, and sleep football, as they call it. All right. So the athletes in those countries, that's what they aspire to do. They grow up to play football, soccer. Can't say that about the United States. We have so many other options. You know, our professional sports leagues, for example, you know, kids, those are the superstars. That's who they see. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to become. Because the other unfortunate thing is, even though it's growing, Major League Soccer, which is our national league, right? It's not on par with some of these other leagues around the world. It's just not even close. I mean, it's not a top 5 soccer league on the planet. So if you're a United States and American soccer player and you want to play professionally, if you really want to be at the top of your profession, you have to go overseas. You know, maybe kids don't want to do that. I don't know. But the appeal, the money, the fame, all these things, you get drawn more towards some of these other sports. And I think that's what's happening. This Christian Pulisic kid who's really, really, really good on our team, think about this now. He's not going to be in the World Cup at the earliest until 2022. That's not good. 866-ESPN, the telephone number, 866-729-3776. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Taking it right up until the top of the hour, it's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. Nationals make it official. Gio Gonzalez is going to get the pitching assignment, as we told you, in a winner-take-all game number 5 tonight. He'll be matched up against Kyle Hendricks of the Chicago Cubs. And I said it earlier in the show, for those who didn't hear me, I think Cubbies win the game tonight. It'll be typical Nationals to win the big game yesterday and then to come home tonight and lose on your home field. So Dusty Baker will remain snake-bitten, trying to win that elusive World Series. I'm going to roll with Hendricks in this situation. The guy was lights out in game number 1. And remember, he had a little bit of a come-down year from his 2016. The guy won the ERA title in the National League last year. He's pitched in big games, of course. Give me Hendricks tonight. I think he'll deliver the Cubbies to the NLCS in a rematch with the Dodgers. And if you think about L.A., remember, the NLCS is going to start on Saturday. And L.A. wrapped up their series with the Diamondbacks back on Monday night. So we're talking Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 4 or 5 days of rest. It's great for your pitchers because they get a little bit of rest, recovery. Dave Roberts can line up his rotation as he sees fit. But it's not as advantageous for the hitters, especially the Dodger lineup, which is swinging the bats really, really well. You don't want them off to the side for about a week. You don't want those bats to go too cold, so we'll see what kind of an effect it has. You almost want to just keep playing as you're accustomed to doing, of course, during a long baseball season. Let's say hi to Mike in L.A. Michael, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
What's up, Mike? Talk to me.
Have the Rams shown the first 5 weeks of the season that they're the best team in the NFC West?
No, they're not. They haven't shown it exactly that they're the best team. I thought that they wasted a golden opportunity to maybe thump their chest a little bit louder if they would have beat the Seahawks on Sunday. That was a bad loss for me.
I was there for that, man. That was heartbreaking.
Yeah, that was a bad loss. It was a bad loss for them, let's be honest. And that was one of those test games. You have a lot of those games, especially for young teams throughout the course of the season. But the fact they ran out to a 10-0 lead, they were home. Seattle's a beatable team. Very beatable team, especially on the road. Rams really should have figured out a way to win that one. And, they had a shot down the end there when the ball just went off of Cooper Kupp's hands at the goal line. Should have reeled it in. But they've shown you some things. Now, 5 weeks does not make a season, but at least they're getting the max, I think, out of what Jared Goff's potential is, and they're headed in the right direction, at least when it comes to the number 1 pick.
And when you think about it, man, they moved up and down the field on the Legion of Boom, man. They got the red zone 5 times. They just couldn't finish drives. So,
yeah.
if they put those drives together, that's a blowout.
Yeah, but remember one other thing, though, Mike, and thanks for the phone call. You say the Legion of Boom. Seahawks aren't the same team anymore, at least defensively. You know, they're not back from when they were going to Super Bowls. They're not on that level. They're still good, but they're not on that level. Close it out with Steven in Queens. Steven, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you? Steven, you there? Going once. Let's move on to Richard in Jersey. Richard, you're on ESPN Radio.
Hi, how you doing?
Good,
Thanks
Rich.
for
What's
taking
up?
my call. Just to let you know, I was one of those person that was going nuts last year when the Yankees start like pretty much trading off, and I was like, this is not the Yankee way. If George was around, he wouldn't have done that, and I was upset. But I'm very excited. I'm very happy, and I'm eating a lot of crow right now, and I'm just very confident that they're going to take it all this year.
Why not,
And
Rich?
so-
You go this far, you might as well win it. And I thank you for the phone call. You have to have total faith in your organization, your leadership, your manager, and even these young players. They really are taking Yankee fans for a ride. Thanks to Herm Edwards. Thanks to Nuno, to Kat, to John. We'll talk to you soon. Dan Graca on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Channel 80 and the ESPN app.
Computer, execute 12.4p operation.
Optimizing algorithm. Running encryption packet alpha. Night. Oh, I don't feel so good.
What is it, computer?
Is it hot in here? It feels hot in here. I feel a little clammy. I should lie down or something.
A computer with a virus? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Those oysters Rockefeller were a mistake.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.